His hand was on my hip, steadying me as he moved inside me, slow at first, then deeper, firmer, until my breath caught in my chest. My hands braced against the narrow bench, fingers curling over the edge for balance. The room was warm, not from temperature, but from how close our bodies were. I could feel every inch of him, not just his size, but his pressure, his weight, the way he filled every space between us, like he'd been meant to from the beginning. My thigh grazed the cold metal post behind me. The contrast of heat and chill made me shiver. I didn't make a sound. I couldn't. There was no room for anything but holding still and holding on. And then voices. Outside. Laughter. 2 men walking past the office. We froze. He was still inside me. My heart slammed in my chest. I didn't move. Neither did he. The only sound was the ragged breath between my lips and the pounding echo in my head that this wasn't just reckless. It was real. And I liked it. I stepped over the line quietly. No drama, no warning, just breath and heat. And I knew I'd do it again. We didn't speak afterward, just redressed in silence. I pulled my leggings up with hands that still trembled, the waistband catching on my damp skin. He leaned against the desk, buttoning his jeans, avoiding my eyes. The tension wasn't gone. It was thicker now, like smoke in a room you're too scared to clear. Kevin, that's his name. He works at the same gym I train at. Tall, dark hair, thick hands, quiet but not shy. He looks at me like he's already undressing me even when I'm across the room. And I never told him not to. I'm 39, married for 12 years. My husband Thomas is kind, steady, safe, and I love him. I do. But lately when he touches me, it feels more like routine than desire. A check mark. A gentle question I'm supposed to answer politely. The difference with Kevin. He doesn't ask. He takes. And maybe that's what I needed more than anything. Not to feel loved, to feel wanted. It didn't start today. It started with glances. Those slow hallway passes where his shoulder would brush mine, a little too close. The way he'd spot me on the leg press and keep his hand a little too firm on my thigh. I told myself I could handle the tension. I was wrong. The first time he texted me late, I didn't answer, but I stared at the screen for too long. The second time, I replied. The third time, I sent a photo, nothing revealing, just my face. But my shirt was loose. No bra. He knew. We circled each other like that for months. Quiet. Careful. Until this afternoon. The gym was nearly empty. Rain outside. I stayed late to stretch. He locked the side door. And then I found myself in his arms, not by force, not by surprise, but like I'd finally stopped pretending I didn't want it. What would you do if the one thing that made you feel alive was also the secret that could destroy your life? Would you pull back or lean in one more time? Because the part that terrifies me isn't that I crossed the line. It's that it didn't feel wrong. It felt like coming up for air, and now I can't breathe without it. It's not the act that haunts you. It's the way it made you feel alive. Like and subscribe if you've ever hated how much you loved the risk. I used to think a quiet life meant a good life. Predictability felt like safety, and maybe for a while it was. My days looked like most women my age. Calendar reminders, grocery lists, cardio on Tuesdays, dinner on the table by 6. My husband doesn't cheat, doesn't gamble, doesn't even raise his voice. Thomas is the kind of man who refills the gas tank without telling me, who folds laundry while watching the news. He asks me how I slept every single morning, even when I'm already out of bed brushing my teeth. And for a long time that was enough. Until it wasn't. It started with the silence between us. Not angry silence, just the slow, soft kind that settles in over years. We still kissed goodbye. Still asked about each other's day. But somewhere between year 8 and year 10, the conversations thinned. The touches became functional, and the bedroom, well, Even when it happened, it felt like a scene we'd rehearsed too many times. Lights off, no rush, no urgency, just polite. I used to fake it not because I had to, but because I couldn't bear the awkwardness if I didn't. And then I stopped faking, and he stopped noticing. That's what got to me. Not the lack of desire, but the lack of noticing. Kevin was nothing like him. I first met him last fall, new hire at the gym, ran small group sessions. At first, I thought he was just polite. Quiet. A little rough in how he spoke, but not disrespectful. Always kept a respectful distance. Until one day, he didn't. It was late September. The gym had mostly cleared. I was wiping down a machine. He passed behind me and said, "You're the only one who actually cleans those properly." I smiled. Germaphobe's daughter. He stopped, turned, looked right at me. I like that. Attention to detail, that moment. It should have meant nothing, just small talk, just words, but it felt like the first real compliment I'd heard in months. And from then on, he kept noticing. He'd adjust my form during workouts, just enough to brush against my lower back. He'd toss me a water bottle when I forgot mine. He remembered my name when I barely remembered his. But it wasn't just what he said. It was the way he watched, like he was holding something back. Like if he got too close, we'd both catch fire. I didn't tell anyone, not even my sister, who I usually share everything with, because it wasn't a crush. It wasn't even emotional yet. It was just this slow burn under my skin, something I couldn't name but couldn't ignore. And the worst part, I liked it. One evening a few weeks later, I stayed late to finish a set. He was in the office. The lights were low. The sky outside had gone grey with rain. I walked past and heard him on the phone, laughing softly. A different kind of laugh. The kind I hadn't heard from my husband in years. And for reasons I still don't fully understand, I stopped walking. He saw me. Hung up. Then he opened the door and just stood there. No smile. No invitation. Just a look that said, "I've been waiting to see if you'd stop." From that night on, it wasn't a question of if, only when. The secrecy became the hook. The glances that lingered a second too long. The way I'd hold my breath when he passed behind me, close enough that his arm would graze mine. And every time it happened, I felt guilty, but I never stopped. The worst moment came on a Sunday morning. Thomas and I were sitting on the couch. He had his arm around me, sipping coffee. I was smiling, laughing at something he said. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking about Kevin, about the way he looked at me last night, when I walked into the weight room, eyes scanning me like he knew exactly what I'd worn beneath my hoodie. And I realized something awful. I hadn't felt that wanted in years. I told myself it was just attention, that I'd never actually do anything, that I was strong enough to stop it before it got out of hand. But you can only press your palm against a flame for so long before your skin starts to burn. And the burn had already begun. The messages started short. "You in today, leg day, stay hydrated." Harmless. Then came the smiley faces, the late night memes, the way he'd reply instantly, even when I didn't expect him to. He wasn't flirtatious in the way men usually are. No emojis with hearts. No compliments that could get him fired. He kept it just under the radar, just close enough to feel personal, just far enough to stay deniable. That's how the line blurred. Quietly. Until one night he texted, "You ever train in silence, no music, just breath?" I stared at the message. It wasn't dirty, but it wasn't clean either. I didn't reply, not right away. But I thought about it all night. At the gym it got worse. He stopped waiting for me to start a conversation. He'd nod from across the floor, a look that made my stomach tighten. And I noticed things I shouldn't have. The way his shirt clung to his back when he wiped sweat with a towel. The veins in his forearms when he unracked plates. One morning he adjusted my grip on the lat pull down. His hand wrapped over mine, steady, large, warm. I didn't move. His voice was low, close to my ear. "There. Feel that difference?" I did. But it wasn't in my arms. We started training at odd hours, early, late. Times I knew fewer people would be around. He never suggested it. I just happened to show up when he was there. The glances turned into pauses. The pauses turned into touches. The touches turned into tension. And that tension followed me home. I'd be folding laundry, and I'd feel the heat behind my neck like his breath was still on me. I'd make dinner and wonder what Kevin would say if he saw me barefoot in the kitchen like this. I started wearing lip gloss again. Just a little, just enough to feel different. Thomas noticed. "You doing something new with your hair?" I smiled. "Just drying it differently." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. The close calls came fast after that. One day I walked into the locker hallway and nearly bumped into him. No one else was around. We stood there too close too long. His hand brushed my elbow. My breath caught. And then someone rounded the corner. I stepped back. He turned away. It was seamless, innocent. But my cheeks were burning. Another day he walked past me while I was doing glute bridges. His eyes didn't linger, but he saw me. I felt it. He didn't smile, just kept walking. But later that night he texted strong form today. I stared at those 3 words. My hand was on my chest, heart thudding. I knew this wasn't just flirting anymore. This was craving. The next time I saw him, I avoided eye contact, on purpose. Kept my distance, wiped down every machine like I was on a mission. But that only made it worse, because when I finally glanced up, he was already watching. That low, steady stare, like he knew I was trying to resist and he respected it, but he didn't believe it would last. I told myself I had to stop, so I took a week off. I told Thomas I was feeling run down, cancelled my sessions, stayed home. I thought if I broke the routine, the feeling would fade, but it didn't. By day 4, I was checking the gym's Instagram, just to see if Kevin was in the background of a group shot. By day 5, I was dreaming about him. Not graphic, just real. His voice, his hands, the way he looked at me when I wore that loose black tank top. When I returned, I tried to act normal, wore a high-neck shirt, no lip gloss. He didn't say anything, didn't even nod. Until I passed the office after my session. He was leaning in the doorway, arms crossed. "Thought you quit on me." I smiled tight small. "Just needed a break." He nodded. "Let the silence sit." Then "glad you're back." And that was it. Just 4 words. But they landed like a match on dry leaves. Later that week, it happened. We didn't plan it. I stayed after closing. He was locking up. Rain tapped the windows in soft, steady beats. I was on the mat, stretching. Alone. He stood in the doorway of the studio backlit by the hallway light. No smile, no question. Just that same stare. My heart was already racing. My hands were already sweating. And when he finally stepped in, the air shifted. Thicker, heavier. It felt like holding my breath before the moment of impact. Because we both knew. This wasn't build-up anymore. This was the edge. The first thing I noticed was how quiet the gym had become. No music, no clanging weights, no hum of treadmills, just the rain against the windows and the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. I was still sitting on the mat, pretending to stretch my hamstrings, but my body was coiled tight, not from exercise, but from knowing he was still there. Watching. I didn't look up. I couldn't. He didn't speak. He didn't ask. He just walked toward me. Each step sounded louder than it should have. His shoes on the rubber floor. The soft shuffle as he knelt beside me. I felt his knee brush mine. My breath caught. Then slowly his hand slid to the back of my neck. Warm, rough, careful. And I didn't pull away. He leaned in and our foreheads touched first. Just that. Just skin. Then his lips were at my jaw. Not my mouth, not yet. It was like he wanted to start where it would ache most. And it did. I turned into him. Just slightly. and that was enough. Our mouths met. Not gentle, not soft. It was need pressed between teeth and breath. He pulled me closer by the waist. My fingers clutched the hem of his shirt, and I could feel the sweat-dried fabric bunch under my grip. We didn't speak. It was too late for talking. Somehow we ended up against the mirrored wall. He lifted me, just enough for my back to press flat against the cool glass. The contrast between the cold behind me and the heat in front of me made my knees falter. I wrapped my legs around him, instinct, not choice. His hands gripped my thighs, firm, unwavering. And then pressure, depth. I gasped. Not from pain, from shock, from how sudden and real it all was. There was no hesitation anymore, only breath, skin, friction. He moved with a kind of restraint that felt like it might crack at any second, like he was trying not to lose control, but didn't know how much longer he could hold back. My forehead rested against his collarbone. I could smell the sweat on his neck, that faint scent of aftershave, and something else, something uniquely him. His mouth brushed my ear. "You feel different." My whole body tensed. I didn't know if that was a compliment or a confession, but I knew it meant he'd thought about this before, just like I had. The mirror behind me fogged in patches where my back pressed into it. The rain outside had picked up louder now. It was all so quiet inside, and yet so loud in my head. I kept thinking we could get caught. At any second, someone could return for a forgotten bag or hear something, but I didn't stop. Neither did he. My legs began to shake from holding on too tight. He lowered me gently, but didn't let go. We sank to the floor together, tangled. My hands were on his chest, fingers spread, trying to memorize the feel of his body through the thin fabric. His were at my waist, his mouth at my throat. And when he moved again deeper this time, I gasped so sharply I had to cover my mouth with my hand. His eyes locked on mine. "Shh," he whispered, voice, barely a breath. And somehow that single syllable made it feel even more dangerous, even more real. Time bent in that room. I don't know how long we were there. Minutes, an hour. It felt like we'd stolen time from the world outside. When it ended, we sat in silence, not touching, not talking. The air between us had changed. I wasn't sure if it was guilt or relief. Maybe both. I adjusted my top, reached for my bag. My hands were trembling. He stood, zipped up, turned toward the door. No one saw us. I nodded. But that wasn't what I was afraid of. I wasn't afraid of being seen. I was afraid of wanting to do it again. As I walked out into the rain, the cold hit me like truth. Everything looked the same. The street, the cars, the sky. But I knew something inside me had shifted. We had crossed the line, and we hadn't tiptoed over it. We'd leapt. That night I stood in the shower, far too long, water scalding hot steam curling up the mirror. I scrubbed every inch of myself like I was trying to erase something, but it wasn't on my skin. It was deeper, in my chest, in my stomach. A low, sick throb of guilt. I dried off and stepped into the bedroom. Thomas was already in bed reading like always. He looked up and smiled. "Feel better?" I nodded. "Yeah, just sore." He didn't ask why, and that hurt more than anything. The next morning, I watched him sip his coffee and scroll through his phone. I studied his face, the familiar lines, the tired eyes. He had no idea. And I hated myself for both the lie and the secret relief. Because the truth, I wasn't sure I could stop. At the gym, I avoided Kevin. Took the long way around the weight room. Trained at odd hours again earlier this time, hoping to miss him. But temptation has a way of finding you. We passed in the hallway 3 days later. Brief. Brushed shoulders. He didn't speak, but he didn't have to. The way his eyes paused on my mouth, I felt everything all over again. That night, Thomas brought home dinner. Chinese, my favorite. He set it on the table, opened the containers, smiled like nothing in the world had changed. And I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him I'd betrayed him, but all I could do was pick at my food and nod along while he talked about a meeting that ran long. The guilt sat in my chest like wet concrete, heavy, quiet, immovable. I told Kevin it was a mistake. I texted, "We can't. Please, it's too much." He didn't reply. Not for 2 days. Then late at night, my phone buzzed. I know, but I still think about it. I stared at those 7 words until the screen dimmed. I didn't reply. But I didn't delete it either. The next few weeks were a blur. I threw myself into routines, laundry errands, volunteering, tried to be present with Thomas, tried to forget the feeling of Kevin's hands. But every time my phone buzzed, every time I saw a man in a black t-shirt and gym shoes, my heart jumped. Even in church, sitting beside my husband, holding his hand during prayer, my mind would wander to that mirror, that breathless silence, that dangerous sacred heat. Then came the first suspicion. It was small. I had just stepped out of the shower phone in hand towel wrapped around me. Thomas looked at me, eyes narrowing just a little too long. "Who are you texting this late?" I froze. "Emily." I lied. "She's asking about the PTA thing." He nodded. "Right." He didn't press, but I felt it. Something in the air had shifted. And once suspicion enters a marriage, it never really leaves. That night I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling. I could feel the weight of his breathing, the warmth of his body next to mine. But it didn't make me feel safe. It made me feel like a traitor. And the worst part, I missed Kevin. Not just the heat, but the feeling of being wanted, watched, craved. I saw Kevin again the next week, briefly, in the parking lot. He walked past me, didn't stop, but just as he opened the door to his car, he looked over his shoulder. "You okay?" That was all he said, but it broke something in me. I nodded, swallowed hard. No. He stood still for a beat. I know. Then he got in, drove off, and I just stood there, keys in hand, feeling like the lie I'd built was starting to crack. We agreed not to do it again. We never said it out loud, but it was understood. And yet I kept going back. Same gym, same hallways, same risk. Because some cravings don't end with guilt. They live in it. They feed on the secrecy. And every time my phone buzzes now, I think it's the end. That Thomas found out. That someone saw us, but I still check it anyway. Because part of me hopes it's him, and part of me is terrified it's not. It happened in the smallest way, not with shouting, not with tears, just a question the kind that sounds casual on the outside, but cuts you open underneath. Thomas was folding laundry in the living room. I was across from him scrolling through my phone, pretending not to notice the way he kept glancing at me. Then he held up a t-shirt I didn't recognize. "This yours?" I froze. It was a men's tee, black, faded, but not Thomas's, not his size, not from our home. I stared at it for too long. My silence answered for me. He tilted his head slightly. "Looks too big to be yours. Or mine." I forced a laugh. Too loud. Maybe it got mixed in from the gym. He didn't smile. He just folded it, slowly, deliberately, and placed it on the side table. That night we didn't talk. He wasn't angry, but he was distant, the kind of quiet that feels loaded. And I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking, did Kevin leave it in my bag by accident? Had I not noticed one tiny mistake? That's all it takes. One thread pulled, and everything starts to unravel. A few days later, I came home early from errands. Thomas's car was in the driveway. Odd. He never leaves work early. I stepped inside, called his name. No answer. I walked into the office. The computer screen was on, my email was open, and I knew. He had read it. Not everything, but enough. Enough to see Kevin's name, enough to see messages I thought I'd deleted. Not the worst ones, but suggestive enough, intimate, curious. His silence afterward said everything. He didn't confront me, he didn't slam doors, but something in his eyes changed. Not rage, not even betrayal. Just distance. Like he was no longer looking at me, just through me. That weekend he left for a work trip, only he never used to pack that quickly, or that lightly. I asked when he'd be back. Tuesday. But he didn't say goodbye like he normally did. No kiss on the cheek. No reminder to water the plants. Just keys. Door. Gone. I sat on the edge of the bed that night and stared at my reflection, and for the first time I didn't see a woman who made a mistake. I saw a woman who knew exactly what she was doing, and did it anyway. I texted Kevin. I think he knows. No reply. Not that night. Not the next morning. And that silence hit harder than anything Thomas had said or hadn't said. Because the truth I never wanted to admit was that I didn't just want Kevin's body. I wanted his attention, his want, his pull. And now I had neither. When Kevin finally replied, it was short. You okay? I stared at those two words, typed, erased, typed again. Finally, I don't know. He didn't text again, and I didn't reach out. Because deep down, I knew whatever we had wasn't built to survive exposure. It was only ever meant to live in shadows. The hardest part isn't that Thomas found out. It's that I don't know what comes next. He hasn't asked for a divorce. He hasn't said he wants space. He just comes home, eats dinner, sleeps on the other side of the bed, like he's waiting to see what I'll do. Like he's watching me choose who I am now that the mask has fallen. And Kevin, he's still at the gym, still shows up, still keeps his distance. But that heat, that look, it's gone. Not cold, just shut off. And I feel the loss in my bones. We were careful. We thought we were invisible. But secrets don't stay secrets forever. And I don't know what scares me more, losing him or being found out again.